Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Dr. Christine Marie Cocciola, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker and have a doctorate in clinical social welfare. I focused on coercive control and have been a domestic abuse advocate and educator my entire life virtually. And I really think that education is how we prevent people from engaging in abusive relationships. So, where is your line? Really, what we know oftentimes is that control can be shrouded in what seems to be love. It's not love, it's control. You can find me at Course of Control Consulting, where I have a longer version of this webinar. I also run a protective parenting program for moms of children who are being coercively controlled, and you can find me on social media platforms. A word about our learning outcomes. We're going to define domestic abuse and intimate relationships. Develop an understanding of the characteristics of coercive control and the strategies that coercive controllers use. Identify the difference between personal power and power over. Personal power is a good thing. Power over is what abusers like to exert onto us. Develop clarity of the characteristics of healthy relationships, including the maintaining of appropriate boundaries, and then resources for support for ourselves or others that we feel may be in a coercively controlling, abusive relationship. So, this webinar will include information and media around the topic of intimate partner abuse. It is important that you seek support services to address any feelings that may rise up that cause you psychological discomfort. So, what are intimate relationships? Well, intimate relationships can be a partner, a parent, a child, a sibling, a friend, a colleague, or even a roommate. The thing is that oftentimes intimate relationships are the ones that we are most closely connected with. And when we are most closely connected to these relationships, we actually trust more. And that makes it, unfortunately, for people who are abusers to actually exert more control over us. Everyone knows someone. Domestic abuse doesn't discriminate. It can be people of any race, age, gender, sexuality, religion, education level, or economic status. And that can be a victim and also can be a perpetrator. So, understanding that perpetrators don't walk around with signs. They don't say that they're perpetrators. They actually are really good at pretending at not being ne- someone who needs to exert control or power over others. Domestic abuse is extremely prevalent. 1 in 3 women experience it throughout their lifetime in the world. Every 9 seconds, a victim of domestic abuse experiences horrifying circumstances of abuse. Girls and young women between the ages of 16 and 24 experience the highest rate of intimate partner abuse. That's almost triple the national average. Domestic abuse is the number one cause of death for African American women between the ages of 15 and 35. What do we know? We know this is extremely prevalent. We know that it often starts at a young age where people, again, don't know where their line is. And oftentimes we're not taught that we should have a line about how we should be treated. This can happen in non heteronormative relationships also. 43% of lesbian women and 61% of bisexual women have experienced intimate partner abuse, as have 26% of gay men and 37% of bisexual men. It's not limited to heterosexual relationships. We know that, right? And it can impact people of all sexual orientations and gender identities. And while anyone can be a victim, it really is true. Anyone can be a victim. It is a gendered crime, with women making up well over 90% of the victims of domestic abuse. Oftentimes, when women have finally reached a point where they might push back either physically or otherwise, and the police are called, they are now considered an abuser, and the male perpetrator who has been, again, harassing them to the point where they might push back will now be considered a victim. So, understanding that a lot of the statistics we see out there don't necessarily highlight how this is often manipulated by the system. 70% of pregnant women experience domestic abuse. 50% of women seen in emergency departments report a history of abuse. And a third of teens don't tell anyone about the abuse. This could be your sister, your brother, your mother, a friend, or not. Most often, abusers are someone we know. It's an intimate relationship. It's someone we care about, someone we trust. And really knowing that unhealthy relationships can start earlier in life. As we all begin discussing domestic abuse more and more, we will become more educated and we can free ourselves of all sorts of intimate partner abuse. Again, abusers don't walk around with a sign, I am an abuser. It's easy to miss the signs. And sometimes when we are connected with someone on a more intimate level, we may miss the signs entirely. It is never our fault. Oftentimes, victims and survivors feel trapped. If they leave, then things might get worse. If they stay, then maybe they can fix it. Maybe they can make things better. So, again, it is never a victim's fault. It is never um, something that you should feel ashamed about. It is certainly something that society needs to protect victims and survivors from. We need to make it easier for victims and survivors to know where their line is and to also be able to escape when they want to and when they're ready to. So, defining coercive control. Coercive control is a pattern of controlling behaviors that create an unequal power dynamic in a relationship. It often involves repeated, ongoing, intentional control tactics used by one partner against the other. It is a diminishing of our agency, our ability to really make decisions that we want to make. We begin to get smaller and smaller and smaller in these relationships, and sometimes we don't even realize it. Behaviors that include things like physical harm for sure, but not always physical harm. It can be a lot of other things. It can encompass psychological abuse, financial abuse, legal abuse. Psychological abuse, by the way, includes verbal assaults. It can be sexual abuse. It can be the use of children as pawns against a protective parent. It is insidious, it is nuanced, and it is so difficult to discern. Again, coercive control is the foundation of domestic abuse. It's deliberate. It's a pattern of behavior. It is oppressive. It is certainly something that can prevent us from getting health care. It's certainly something that can be a grabbing of the arm or a slamming of the door or even a locking in a room. These are all evidence of coercive control, but it also can be so much more nuanced that even the most astute of us can miss the signs. So I want to go back to this slide. It's a diminishing of a person's autonomy, the inability to see clearly. If you feel like you're living in a fog, it might be coercive control. If you feel like you have to walk on eggshells, it might be coercive control. Again, it can be all of these things. It can be physical abuse, but oftentimes that's not the identifying characteristic. What we know about domestic abuse is it doesn't just automatically start off as physical abuse. It starts off with someone trying to control you. And the more that they can't control you, the more elevated they're going to become. And sometimes that results in physical abuse. But certainly the beginning tactics are psychological abuse, are this inability, again, for someone to create the space for us to feel safe, where we're not walking on eggshells, where we're not being manipulated, intimidated, isolated, and threatened in some way. It certainly is sexual abuse. It could be technological abuse where if you think you're being stalked, you may in fact be being stalked because coercive controllers really want to control everything that you're doing. And they have this inability to trust you because they are not trustworthy. So of course they're going to check up on you and stalk you. Financial abuse, legal abuse, and use of the children. I would say to you, what's important to know is that every single one of these would be considered criminal if it was done to a stranger. But because it's in an intimate relationship, it's not perceived all the time as criminal, even by the victim, but certainly oftentimes by the system. So, power over is coercive control. Unhealthy behaviors and dynamics include one person having power over another person. There is not equality in the relationship. Each person isn't mutually respectful of each person. Each person is not allowed, when a relationship is unhealthy, each person isn't allowed to have independence, isn't allowed to have autonomy. One person has the power in the relationship. That's coercive control. And it truly is any behavior that is an attempt to minimize or diminish another human being. So if someone that you are in a relationship with makes fun of you a lot and you tell them to stop, but they still keep doing it, that's them really trying to harm you and diminish you. That would be psychological abuse, and that is coercive control. If someone told you that they miss you all the time, why are you going out again on Friday night? That's a way to control you. Now, if you truly believe that you've been going out too frequently, that's one thing, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about someone preventing you from having a good time or texting you the whole time you're out, calling you, where are you? Why aren't you home yet? That's coercive control. So, red flags. In the beginning, lots of love bombing. I love you so much. You're the most amazing person in the world. Persistence, being very persistent, moving very fast. Maybe you've seen some anger that makes you feel uncomfortable or unsafe. Oftentimes, they will tell you all of their exes are crazy. Again, this is in a dating situation or in a partnership situation. Maybe their dating profile is not reality. Maybe they're demanding of time and space. They tell you you cannot take a joke, you are too serious, or you are too sensitive after you've expressed a concern. This could be with a parent. Maybe you have a parent who tells you you're too sensitive all the time. Maybe you have a parent who makes fun of you. Maybe they're demanding of your time, right? Use their supposed love for you to explain their jealousy. I love you so much. I'm worried about you. That's why I don't want you going out with your girlfriends. Again, a parent could do this too. It could be someone that you're in a relationship with. If you're dating, it could be a partner. It could be certainly again a parent. Use their supposed love for you to express concern about your independence. So these are people who really don't want, they want to get you into a smaller and smaller space. They want to make your world smaller so they can control you more. A word about love bombing is oftentimes it's intense in communication, intense in gifts, intense in attention, intense in speed, intense in actions. I'm sure you've heard this term love bombing, but it truly is a significant red flag. Coercive controllers do not show up with a sign that says, I'm a coercive controller, but they typically present as loving and in love with you. How can we tell the difference? Well, when the emotions seem to vacillate between very positive when you're accepting of it, but the moment that you try to put a boundary in or say, I'm uncomfortable with that. Why did you buy me that gift? That's too expensive. And they become angry, then that would be a sign, right? That that's not authentic, that they are doing these things simply to control you. No one should be calling you their soulmate as soon as they meet you or even right after they've met you. No one should be saying, we need only each other. Please don't leave me. I only check in because I'm worried about you. These are ways to control us. So, a word about persistence and the word no. No, typically, when a man says no, it is the end of the discussion. When a woman says no, it is the beginning of a negotiation. That's what Gavin DeBecker says. So, really, no need to negotiate this. If you said no, the answer is no. We are really not here to take care of others. We can be kind, but it is not our job that if someone is unhappy with a decision we made, that we have to accommodate them. That's not healthy. That's not our line. Where is your line? Oftentimes, men are very nice when pursuing, and women are often too nice when rejecting. So, all of this intensifies after the honeymoon phase of the relationship. There's going to be some love bombing followed by devaluation, like, how could you treat me that way after I bought you these flowers if you didn't really want the flowers? Gaslighting, sabotaging, anything, sabotaging your relationships with other people, sabotaging maybe your success. Do you really have to study now? I really thought we were going to spend the night together versus let me help you study and really helping you study. Love versus hate. It's a lot of vacillation between either people or things being good or bad. There's really not a lot of gray area. Deflection rarely takes responsibility, lying, diminishing of you as a person, and very entitled. You become an object to them. They are so proud of you, very proud of you as someone on their arm, but not necessarily supportive of you in reaching some of your successes. They feel entitled to you. So understanding that you have to have a space where you end and where the other person begins. Boundaries may sound like I am not responsible for your actions or emotions. I am not comfortable discussing this topic. I need to take a break from this conversation. I no longer am able to discuss this. No, I need some time to think about this. I appreciate your opinion, but this is my decision. I understand you're upset, but it is not okay to speak with me this way. I am not able to help with that. That's it. Very clear using I statements, saying how you feel and creating the space with how you feel. Whether you're casually having sex, just starting to date, or in a committed relationship, setting and respecting boundaries is essential to any and every healthy relationship. It's important that partners feel comfortable expressing their wants, goals, fears, and limits. And really, everyone's boundaries are honored. That means everyone feels comfortable communicating their needs without fear of what another person will do in response. So, healthy relationships are open, mutual respect, trust and believe in each other, capable of making decisions together, support each other's successes and failures. You enjoy your personal time. Unhealthy disagreements are often frequently fought about or avoided entirely. Trust is a struggle. Boundaries are often crossed. Only spending time with your partner. Loss, really, of other connections. And that's when it segues into abusive, where if it's gone from healthy, what seemed to be healthy, into unhealthy, the next step is going to be abusive. Insulting, demeaning, verbal and or physical abuse controls partners' friendships, clothing, thoughts, and activities, perhaps forceful during sexual intimacy and non-consensual. Gaslighting, manipulation. One partner may walk on eggshells and perhaps fear the other person. If this is you, this could be, perhaps, most likely an abusive relationship. Personal power is about healthy behaviors and dynamics. We need to really tap into our inner strength and actually ask ourselves, is this relationship healthy? Do I need this relationship to be happy? Because if we need a relationship, regardless of how we're treated, to be happy, that is really not healthy. We probably need a therapist to talk about why that would be the case. Rather than being dependent or dominant or subordinate, healthy relationships work cooperatively. There's self worth and they affirm each other. Personal power means being okay with boundaries, not threatened by boundaries. So, personal power is a way of experiencing power that is internal. So, I'm asking you to take the time and ask yourself in all of your relationships, all of those intimate relationships you have, a roommate, a colleague, a boss at work, do you have personal power? Are you able to express how you truly feel? Are you able to behave like you would naturally behave without feeling ashamed by someone else, by feeling like you've done something very wrong, by feeling like you have to walk on eggshells or there's going to be repercussions? In a healthy relationship where each person has personal power and no person has power over, partners will argue or disagree sometimes, but they take responsibility, compromise, feel remorse, and make genuine efforts to improve. Unhealthy or toxic behaviors are red flags. Partners of inappropriate behavior and repeated unhealthy behaviors are patterns of inappropriate behavior and repeated unhealthy behaviors are coercive control and abusive. In a healthy relationship where each person has personal power and no person has power over, partners will argue or disagree sometimes, but they take responsibility, compromise, feel remorse, and make genuine efforts to improve. Unhealthy or toxic behaviors are red flags. Patterns of inappropriate behavior and repeated unhealthy behaviors are coercive control and abusive. Abusers know that the best way to harm a victim is through those things that matter most to the victim. It's really important to understand that if someone's going to use your vulnerability against you, whatever it is, whatever that really important thing is that you shared, if they're going to use that against you, that is abuse. So here's a helpful website about healthy relationships quiz. Also, again, the places to contact if you're at all having some psychological reactions to this webinar. Love is respect. I always say if we can tell 10 people and they tell 10 people, that's how we get the word out. 10 by 10. And here's my copyright information. And lastly, I would love it if you could take a picture of that QR code and do an evaluation. Thank you very much. Have a great day.